Again, we're going to be sharing scary stories that we have personally gone through, Joni and I. And another reason why we wanted to do this is we wholeheartedly believe that we learn by example. You know, these are all mistakes that once we have gone through them once, we're never going to make again.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Some of this stuff cannot be avoided either, though. But we also like to say that, like, you know, even if you're new, take our examples and apply it to your business, and learn from other people's mistakes as well. So,
Right, stuff happens, and it certainly does in real estate. It's what we're trying to do today is share our stories and tie the stories back to a portion of the contract at where the story originated from. You know, is it something out of inclusions, exclusions? Is it something from setting up showings, or is it something from title? But those are all the areas that we're going to process through when we're doing a transaction. And each one of those has its own little cautionary tale. So I think in sharing those and being happy Halloween to everybody, we're going to try and scare the bejesus out of you. I'll start with a classic.
Yeah.
The classic, and it just came up in a conversation I had with a newer agent last week. Under inclusions or exclusions, and has to do with not really double checking the inclusions and exclusions in an offer, to maybe, if you're not sure about something, to verify it. And sometimes it relates back to the listing agent who wasn't careful enough to find out from the seller what's actually a fixture, what's actually included, what's actually not included. It also goes back to the thing, have you ever read the definition of what a fixture is and what is actually included automatically in an offer? So when those gaps are either the listing agent or the buyer's agent or the buyer or the seller miss something in inclusions and exclusions, it can result in an issue. And sometimes it can be a very serious issue. It can go all the way to lawyers and lawsuits and things like that. But for the most part, they're scary stories. And for the most part, it might be something coming out of your pocket if you made a mistake. The classic line is, if sometime in your career you haven't actually bought a water softener, you're not in real estate until you do, because it's a common inclusion that the seller might not bring it up, the fact that the water softener is rented, and they're including it. It's a fixture, and the listing agent didn't pay attention. And so when the buyer writes the offer, he writes down all the things that are included. And one of the things he writes down, because he sees it in MLS, is the water softener. And all of a sudden we get to, hopefully prior to closing, so we can figure it out, that the water softener is not owned by the seller, it's owned by the company, and the seller is just renting it. So the buyer thinks he's getting a water softener included in buying the purchase of the home, and he finds out that he's not, and then he's expecting it. And who does he expect it from? The seller, or does he expect it from his agent? Who made the mistake? Who put it in the offer? Who didn't verify it? And a lot of times it's the buyer's agent that made the mistake, didn't verify it, put it in the offer, and now the buyer wants it, and the seller says, I don't have one, and the buyer's agent has to buy it. So it is the classic story of a scary story that can happen, that can cost you money. I mean, water softeners are what, 2,000, something around there. But there can be inclusions and exclusions that are missed or not verified in writing an offer. And you, as the buyer's agent, can be held responsible to deliver it to the buyer. So as I said, we want to scare you today. That's the biggest thing. Check inclusions, exclusions, verify it. Don't just assume, never assume in real estate anyway,
Mhm.
but don't assume inclusions and exclusions.
I'm gonna hop on that one and share one that I think the lesson here is having the seller have a clear understanding of what a fixture is. This would be a hard one for a listing agent to pinpoint when they're doing their walkthrough on a listing appointment. So, again, we advise during your listing appointments, as you're going through room by room, kind of asking about certain things that could be perceived as a fixture and when they're not, kind of defining what a fixture is as you're going through that listing appointment. So anything attached to the wall, attached to the floor, are all considered fixtures. So we had an agent who had a listing on the north, I think Mequon, doesn't matter where it was, but they had a bar in the basement, and the bar was very much a part of the room. It looked like it would be attached to a floor, and just assumed that it was a fixture, that it would stay with the home. It went with the room, it went with the surrounding decor. And buyer shows up to the final walkthrough and the bar is completely gone. It was removable. You could move the bar, and seller wanted it and decided to take it with them. And so listing agent had to have a conversation with the seller to convince them to keep it, but not without paying the seller to keep it. So that was another costly mistake. Again, I think that would be one really hard for a listing agent to, I would have made the same assumption, that the bar was just included because it looks like it's a part of the room, but it wasn't. So yeah, just making sure you're asking, even though it seems like they're inconsequential
Obvious.
questions and it seems obvious, just make the question. A big one with that is islands, kitchen islands that could just be bought and movable, but they look like there's a part of the room, just based off of how it's styled with the rest of it, the decor. So
Yep. TV mounts on the wall are included, are fixtures. The
Mhm.
TV is not.
So
Anybody have one they want to jump in and share?
along the lines of inclusions and exclusions.
I had not been super diligent about checking the
Well, in selling real estate since 1984, I've certainly have a few of my own personal scary stories to share. One of them, which resulted in just a laughing fit that we probably couldn't even control ourselves. I was with a buyer and we were going through a very nice house. My showing had been confirmed, and I let the two of us in with the lockbox and walking around, went upstairs, very beautiful house, and checking out the ensuite, and there was a naked man in the shower. And showing it. And he saw us and got livid, started yelling at us. And the more he yelled at us, the more we kept laughing. And we got to the point we were laughing so hard we couldn't even walk out of the bathroom. But that was, it was kind of scary, but it was kind of funny. It certainly was scary for that poor guy in the shower.
Yeah.
So the lesson on this one is double check with your showing confirmations. But sometimes you can't verify it with all of the owners in the house. So one owner can say, sure, that's fine, don't worry, but then they forget to tell other people who are living in the house not to take a shower during that time.
Yeah, I think with our modern technology with showing time, to make sure that all parties, whether they're just the decision makers on approving showings or not, should be getting notifications of when a showing is happening. So I think that a lot of that happens with like teenagers, maybe
Mhm.
putting the teenagers on showing notifications as well, just receiving FYIs. So,
Yeah, and if you're the listing agent, make sure that you have this good conversation with the seller in filling out showing time. I mean, talking about dogs that are in the house, cats, I mean, a classic is cats being let out, cats escaping out.
mhm.
And all of those things should be added to the showing time instructions, don't let the cat out, make sure the dog is in a in a crate. I've walked in on a boa constrictor one time that I wasn't made aware of. But in the showing instructions, if you're the listing agent, educate your seller into what to expect when the agent walks in.
Yeah. Along the same lines with the showing, and I don't know if this ever could have been avoided, but I had a key fall into the deck slats of a porch. And it's sided on all sides, excuse me, it's covered on all sides, so I couldn't retrieve the key. And yeah, so just had to make a uncomfortable phone call to the listing agent to let them know that either they had to get a new key made or try and retrieve it themselves, because there was just no way that I was going to be able to get it. But I know that I was like holding on to that key like the entire time that I was showing the property. There have been so many times too where I've like set a key, like I'll walk in, open up, put the key down like on a kitchen island or something, and then like misplace a key. I have now made it a practice to always put the key back into the lockbox. As soon as I open the door, enter the door, out that way you always know where it is. And you'll have to open the lockbox back up when you have to lock up. But if you lose somebody's key, that is just a really pit in your stomach phone call to make.
Right.
So,
I dropped a seller's key one time. I had it in my pocket of my coat and I dropped it somewhere in Mequon near all the shops and everything. And it even had the seller's ID phone number and stuff on it.
mm,
And talk about a scary story. Somebody very nice in Mequon found the key and called the seller and saying, "Hey, I found your key next to Harvey's restaurant on the sidewalk." And then the seller had to call me, say she got this phone call.
yeah.
Another scary key story. I was telling Steph earlier, I was showing a duplex on the Lower East Side, and it was kind of a seedy duplex. And I had these two buyers. They had just called me, so I was showing my own listing. There had tenants upstairs that weren't allowing a showing on the first show around, and they weren't there. So I let these guys in. We were looking at the first floor unit. They were complaining about everything. They were very grumpy. And so they said, "Well, can we at least see the basement?" And I said, "Well, sure." So the basement had a separate staircase off the foyer. So we went out of the first floor unit. I shut the door behind me and it locked. And inside that first floor unit was my purse, the lockbox, the keys, everything, my phone. And we proceeded down to the basement, but then of course we couldn't get back into the first floor unit. Thankfully, those grumpy buyers hadn't left anything in there. So they left, they were mad at me. And I had to call locksmith to the tune of about, on a payphone, by the way, to the tune of about $100+ to have him come to this duplex and get me into that first floor unit. I hope we're scaring you.
Yeah. Just take these lessons.
But take these lessons, make sure that you have good clasp of the seller's keys. You're responsible for it as a listing agent. The key may seem like a very small thing, but it's huge liability. I know of an agent who lost a listing one time just because another agent showing the property didn't put the key back in the lockbox.
Mm,
And the seller called the listing agent and fired her right on the spot because she let it happen while she had the listing. So keys are very, very, very critical, obviously, because you are taking responsibility for someone's home.
Should we move on to more costly mistakes than that?
Sure, we can get real expensive here.
Okay, this was a mistake that I made when I was on an administrative staff. And yeah, it's embarrassing, but I'll keep going. So as part of our service to our sellers, we would type up marketing materials, seller improvement sheets. I don't know how I got this information. I think I was editing an old, a prior listings seller information sheet, just reusing like a Word doc. And somehow on there, it was noted that there was a new roof on the property, and there wasn't, in fact, a new roof on the property. We did not have the seller review the seller update sheet, and this is where the lesson is now. Each time thereafter, the seller update sheet would be re-reviewed by the seller. And then now I go insofar as like having a seller just type it up themselves. And I'll give them an example of how the structure should be, but I'll even like just share a Word doc, a Google Doc with them and have them write on there. So that it's in their words. Anyway, the property did not have a new roof. There was an accepted offer. There was an inspection, and it revealed roof repairs to the tune of $3,000, roughly. And my team had to cover the cost of those roof repairs for the buyer, which ended up being a better solution and less expensive solution than covering a whole new roof, because that was what was advertised on the seller update sheet. So yeah, it was really embarrassing. I surprised I wasn't just like let go, but yeah, my boss at the time was very understanding. So yeah, I mean, that's a huge mistake. So now, if you're going to be doing something like that, again, it's like having that seller approve statements like those. So I think from then on too, we would have them, if we typed it up ourselves, we would have them initial like the corner of the seller update sheet, so that we could prove that they had their set of eyes on it. So yeah, that's a listing prep mistake. Very big one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, I think the main phrase to keep repeating through today's scary stories is never assume anything. I've seen it as an agent myself, and then as a manager for 18 years, I've seen it with my agents. The minute I hear an agent that was in my office say, well, I assumed, I'm going, oh no. And another phrase that used to scare me a lot when I would hear my agents in my office say things like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Don't ever please say that, because that puts all the liability, all the responsibility on you, the real estate agent, and you just can't do that, because not only then does that liability and responsibility go to that agent, it also goes to that agent's firm. So it means then that Keller Williams and you are responsible because you said, don't worry, I'll take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we certainly help our clients as both buyers and sellers, but we don't help them to that extent. So make sure you don't assume anything, you verify conditions of properties, and you verify everything.
Mm-hmm.
You don't assume anything.
Yeah, I mean, the part of the commission that we make, I mean, high risk, high reward, we make very good commissions. And this kind of being this detail oriented is part of it, our job isn't just sticking a sign in the yard and, it's being mindful of all of these things too. Got another one. This is probably along the dates and deadlines, calculations and making sure that we're on top of dates and deadlines. This also could be something that, if you're offering a certain service for your clients, that kind of goes above and beyond, typical services, then we need to make sure that we're putting a system in place to keep on top of those services, those additional services. So in this one, we would take it upon ourselves to order the well inspection and water testing for any properties that were on a well. That deadline in the offer to purchase is kind of unique. It's calculated from the day of closing and then going backwards. So how it reads is that it's due to a buyer no later than 15 days prior to closing. Instead of, putting on the seller, like, here are some names and numbers of some well inspectors or well and water testers, make sure that you order it by this certain date. We would take it upon ourselves to order it. I forgot to order a well test and a water test and a well inspection for a client. I ordered it before the deadline, but we were not going to receive those results until after the deadline. The buyer and seller were in a point of contention over an inspection. And I had an attorney seller who was very savvy, and worked very hard to keep this deal together through the inspection contingency. And then my failure to keeping a buyer in a deal that keeping a buyer in a deal that the buyer did not want to stay in, through my failure to order this water testing in time, I put the seller at a huge risk of allowing the buyer to potentially get out of the deal through this completely different contingency. As I said, I was able to order the test in time. What I had to do though was pay, I think, twice the amount to get the water test results back expedited. And I got them back like the day before the contingency was up, thank God. But it's just, those are the things that keep you up at night. Like I was
Totally.
sick to my stomach. Those are, kind of the stories too that make you feel like you are in the wrong business, but you get through them. I didn't have to go to the seller on anything. I got it all back in time. But the lesson there is, a lot of agents will tell you, don't take on those kind of services yourself, like go ahead and give them recommendations for companies, but, kind of put the onus on the seller to take the responsibility. You give them the deadline, and making sure that you can keep on top of them to get it ordered. But kind of taking that responsibility yourself, really, again, like what Joan was just describing, just like puts you in a liable position for the firm and for yourself. And the fact that that seller was an attorney too, it just was layers of nauseousness. Yeah. So yeah. So another thing to do there too is like putting a system in place for ordering those things on time. I put dates and deadlines on my calendar. But then, putting a calendar reminder to order the test on this certain day to make sure that it's done, so you just have to like really just be mindful. And, again, kind of, it seems like it's obvious. It seems like it's a small detail that you'll never forget, but this is why we have checklists, and we have to like return to these checklists all the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, this can be complicated. Obviously, going through a transaction can be really complicated for a listing, for representing a buyer. But hopefully you have several going at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not just, I'm going to take care of this deal. I've got my calendar all lined up. I've got my dates, ordered and everything. I'm verifying everything. But all of a sudden now maybe you've got 3 or 4 transactions that are going to be closing about the same time, or they've got staggered required dates. And if you're not keeping track of them, you're going to miss one. The biggest missed date, the most costly missed date in a contract, and it usually happens to newer agents because once this happens to you, you don't ever forget it, is to be mindful of the inspection contingency date that it expires.
Mm-hmm.
You write the offer, and in the inspection, you say you'll have this done in 15 days or whatever. The caution right there in the offer is to make sure you leave enough time to negotiate in the inspection. But some agents forget the date, or forget the date that it's amazing how many calls I get from a newer agent saying they've got this inspection and they're doing the negotiations and everything. And I'll say, when is your inspection contingency up? And they go, oh, I'm not sure. Wait a minute, I'll look it up.
Yeah, that's the one deadline you just have burned in your brain.
Right. Anytime one of you is calling and you're not sure of, number one, what the inspection deadline is, or number two, whether your seller has right to cure or not. Those are things should be burned in your head, and know those dates. If they do have right to cure, know how many days the seller has to cure. I mean, those are things you don't forget, because that's what's going to keep you up at night. If you blow a deal for your client because you forgot a date, or you didn't get it done in a date time, I can make it even scarier for you. They can complain to the Department of Public and Safety, or Department of DSPS, and as an incompetent behavior. So, as I said, these things will keep you up at night. These things happen in real estate. As Steph was saying, she was embarrassed about a mistake she made. We all make them.
Mm-hmm.
We all make them. And as I said, as a manager for 18 years, I saw all agents make mistakes, from newbies to very high producing star real estate agents. We all make these mistakes, and it's up to Steph and to me being here to answer your questions, to help get you the support you need and the reminders if you do need them.
Yeah, we're here too for moral support, because we definitely have had to talk people off of, just reminding them that we're all human. So
I had a couple of agents leave me a story. They couldn't be on today, but one agent, this is a post-closing story. And as Steph and I talk about a lot, if it's post-closing, if it is already closed, our role as a real estate agent, even though we help them, take care of them, nurture them through the whole thing, we have to step back and do nothing after closing. They are to be settled between the buyer and the seller. And if that can't happen, then somebody has to get an attorney. But your role as a real estate agent ceases as soon as the closing is over. One of our agents called in with this story last week. She wanted to add to, she was going to be on today and she couldn't make it. But she just sold a house and she had the buyers. What the buyer was not made aware of, nor was she. I don't think even the listing agent knew about it, but that the owner of the house liked to take care of stray cats. And so she left food out every night for stray cats to come and have food. And she even set up a catacomb of plastic boxes with little blankets in them for the cats to get out of the cold or the weather. And then she cleaned all of that when she was packing and never mentioned it to anybody. So lo and behold, our agent's buyer closes, moves into this house and starts seeing cats coming to the house, coming to the door, walking around the windows, looking in.
Something new every day.
Yeah, sort of like a horror story. And they don't know what to do about it. They found out through a neighbor that she had this sort of cat rescue place. And now that she was gone and there was no food and there were no cute little boxes with blankets in it, the cats wanted to know what was going on. They couldn't reach the seller. And as far as this agent in our office got, she was advised by me not to get in the middle of it, not to try to solve the problem for her buyer, not to make phone calls, not to do anything, but other than try to get a hold of the seller, see if they could resolve this, call an attorney, try to figure out what you want to do on your own, but she really couldn't offer any suggestions. What she did was she called Pause, and they said, yes, you can come and buy some traps and trap them and then bring them to the Humane Society. Well, I guess it was quite a lot of cats. And she had to buy the traps. And so she certainly didn't want to do that. Well, anyway, that's when the agent called me and said, what do I do? And I said, nothing. Unfortunately, we can't help. Today, she updated me and saying the neighbor wants to help this new buyer take care of these cats. So they were going to go in and rescue the cats together. And then this buyer may contact an attorney afterwards. But I said, that's a pretty good, scary story when you've got herds of cats circling your house.
That's a good one. That's a new one. It's always something
Totally
different.
new.
Did anyone get their wheels in motion as far as having their own stories? Did this prompt any or recall any stories from you guys? No?
I guess we're the only ones that make mistakes.
I have a couple. This is Joan.
Ron has something.
I have a couple. When I sold,
Do you have something?
what's that?
Did you have something? Did you have a story?
Yeah. So when I sold my first house, I have a like an old wood burning stove that is purely decorative, but it's got like the pipe going up to the wall. Like I made it look like it was connected.
Sure.
And apparently the buyers thought that it was included with the listing, which I didn't realize, but after, so she was a first-time home buyer. She even came and did her walkthrough and the pipe was down. So you could see that it was no longer, I mean, it wasn't even hooked up as if it was functional. It was purely just decorative. There's no hole in the wall, nothing. And then after I moved out, my agent called me and says, the buyers want to know where the stove is. And I'm thinking like the kitchen stove, which is built in. And I'm like, it's in the kitchen. She's like, no, she's talking about the wood burning stove. And I'm like, oh, well, that's decorative, like a couch or whatever. So my agent was good. I mean, she explained to the buyer's agent, like the wood burning stove is just like furniture, whatever, like it's in the pictures, but it's not included. So yeah.
That's a hard one though.
That is.
Because I might think that, yeah, so you didn't have to like compensate her or anything or
no.
Okay.
Well, and it's because like I said, it was decorative. There's no hole in the wall. Like
Like, yeah,
So if it was fixture, it would be
Yeah,
secure.
the pipe would have been connected into the wall. and
Right, and it would have had to vent to the outside of the house if you were actually
that
using
seems like
it.
that would have been something that would come up on inspection, like, because an inspector would look at that and say, oh, this isn't.
Right, and I mean, don't remember that part. I mean, this was like 10, 15 years ago, whatever.
Sure.
But
It's a
yeah,
good one, though.
so that was one. And then at that same house, they wanted a new furnace installed, which I, of course, could not pay for because it came in on the inspection that there was stuff wrong with it. So my agent had said you should just give them, find out what it would cost to replace it, and then just give them money at closing, which we did, which all was good. And then I guess when they went to do the installation, there was insulation in the chimney, which I was not aware of, which apparently is a fire hazard.
Got it.
So then there was more involved with that, but I mean, again, I was not aware of it, so, yeah.
That just, that prompted my memory on, and this is like a scary story, but just like a lot of these questions come up where, buyer and seller want to like find a responsible party, to take care of a situation, and sometimes there just isn't. So I had a listing that the furnace went out like a week before closing. And, one party wanted to find blame, like, the buyer should buy it, or the seller should pay for it. They ended up just splitting the cost of it. But sometimes there's just those circumstances where there's, it's just like stuff happens, so being reminded that like buyer and seller just need to like come to terms innocently. So thank you for sharing that, Dawn.
Yeah, Peter's on. Peter Gosman, welcome. Called me earlier, and I think he has a pretty bona fide scary story he wants to share. Go on, Peter.
I'm off mute. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
So, I don't know how much time we have left.
Oh, we're
just to give
fine.
you- Okay. So, about 3 years ago, right about this time of year, during my first bold, I was doing some things to settle my mom's estate. And there's something that you can do to transfer assets by affidavit if they're under a certain level. So I was in the bank taking care of the paperwork, and the bank manager called in one of his associates and said, "Hey, you should probably listen to this." So I thought it was just a training opportunity. And as we're discussing, the gentleman that the bank manager called in said, "Oh, my mom recently died too, and we've got to sell her house." And me being bold said, "I'm your man, let's go." And he said, "Someone told us we should wait for spring." I said, "Absolutely not. You get it on market right now and we can start the process." I said, "Okay, great. I love the way you think. Meet me at the house on Saturday, and I'll have my sister there because she's part of this process too, and we'll get everything going." I said, "Awesome." So I go to the house on Saturday with all of my listing documents. I walk in, there's no place to put anything down. I mean, the house was such a mess. There was not clear counter space anywhere. So I'm going through all of the things that we discuss when we're doing a listing. And we're just about at the end of the listing presentation. And the brother says, "The reason mom died is because dad killed her here in the house." And I thought, that's terrible. Here, you sign here and you sign here. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of doing. So I got everything signed, and then we're looking forward to what is the next thing that we have to do. Is there a disclosure requirement? I don't know. So I call the legal hotline, and the WRA person was almost giddy. She said, "Oh my gosh, We would love to have a case like this because this has never been decided in Wisconsin. In other jurisdictions, a case of non-disclosing a death on the property has been decided to the point of rescission of sale. But here we would love to have defining case. Oh my God, what am I going to do now? So I talked to the brother and the sister, and I got their name of their attorney and described this situation. The attorney's advice was, this has no bearing on the house itself. There's no bearing on the structure of the house. This is not to be disclosed. So now I have a confidentiality requirement.
Okay.
And my mentor at the time is Andy Stillman, still a mentor, still look to him for advice. And he said, you know, Peter, there are 3 kinds of people that are always completely honest: toddlers, drunks, and new neighbors. The last thing you want is them unloading the moving truck and the neighbor comes up and goes, hey, what did you think about the murder? So, and this was widely known through the entire neighborhood. So I'm wondering what I'm going to do. In the meantime, we're cleaning up the house. This is one of my first listings. I don't have any money to hire somebody, and the estate doesn't have the money either. And the kids are so traumatized, they don't want to have anything to do with the house. So and my wife, she's cleaning up cabinets, and I'm cleaning up blood from a murder scene.
Oh,
So somebody said, you got to leverage this. That was before I learned about leverage. Anyway, we get an offer, and it's from a Keller Williams colleague. So now what am I going to do? I said, you know what? I called her up. I said, I have some obligations to confidentiality on the part of my client. There are things that you should know that I can't tell you. However, if you were to Google the address, that might provide some clarity.
God.
So she Googled the address, and all of the news came up, and they were fine with it. At the inspection, they brought in sage, had the house saged, they sprinkled some holy water around, had the house blessed. The transaction went through, and the punchline is probably the wrong thing. The final thing that makes this cool is these people that bought the house love Halloween. So the fact that there was possibly a haunting was a positive for them, not a negative at all. And I don't think does that qualify as scary, do you think?
That's, yes.
that is definitely a scary Halloween story.
I think we need to end it there
Yes.
because I don't know if we can top that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, that's
Thank
a
you.
way to navigate that. That's a lot of, resources to go through. So
Well, in summary, as we said, there's nothing better than a story. The more stories you collect in your business, you can relate to your clients, because it's that I've been there, done that, and you have that experience of going through something. So either collect and listen to other agents' stories. Don't forget the stories that you have, and those will help educate you and educate situations for your clients going forward. But don't forget, stories are important in this business.
yep.
And the longer we go, as Steph knows and as Joan knows, this is not the only story that I have. This is one of the reasons when I walk down the hallway toward Focus Title, they all try to look busy.
Yeah, Peter teased me in Facebook saying, oh, I don't have any unusual situations. And I just replied, ah, ha, 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 ha. Always looking forward to a call from Peter.
Yeah. All right, well, next week we're doing the zip forms clause library. So that'll be a good one to attend. And on that note, happy Halloween, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
you.
Hope you learned something.
Thanks, guys.
you.